Our next two speakers are going to be men who can tell you the perspective and the story from having lived through these things. First, I would like to introduce Johnny Horn.
Well, my name is Johnny Horn, formerly Staff Sergeant Johnny Horn. I served in the United States Army from September 1999 until December 2004. I went to the Middle East on 4 different trips, twice to Kuwait for peacekeeping missions, and twice to Iraq. And on my second tour of Iraq, I was charged with the first-degree murder of killing an Iraqi in the line of duty. We had been out on patrol for about 5 or 6 days straight. If you can imagine going about 5 days with no sleep, just doing your regular jobs here at home, imagine doing it overseas. We did that, and this one particular day we were asked to go back in. We had to get cleaned up and get prepared for a battle that we were scheduled to go into an attack into into Sadr City the next day. So we came back, we took showers, we thought we were going to get a little rest, and no sooner than we got done with our showers, we were told by our commander, you got to go back out. We loaded up, headed back out, and we were told that there were some enemy that were being trucked over, like big dump trucks. We were told that they were coming over to fight against us into the battle in Sadr City the next day. Somehow it leaked, it got out or whatever. That's what we were told. I don't know. I wasn't there when all the intel was put together, but that's what we were told. So during this time we went out, we started hearing on the radio, not long after we got out there, we started hearing over the radio that there was trucks in our area full of people, and so we started scoping them out. Now I was an infantry squad leader, and I rode in the back of a Bradley at this time. For those of you who don't know what a Bradley is, it's an armored personnel carrier. Kind of like a little tank sort of thing. Just don't ever tell tankers that a Bradley's a tank. You'll piss them off. Anyway, we got out there and we started hearing about the people in the back of the truck. We started scoping them out. One of the trucks was spotted throwing boxes over the back of the truck. They were in this big dump truck thing. They were throwing these boxes over the back of the truck onto the ground. Didn't know exactly what they were. One of the Bradleys in my platoon called up, told about it, and said, we'd like to engage one of the boxes to see if it explodes. That was our way of identifying if it was an explosive, an IED or something like that. So you got to call up on today's modern battlefield, you got to call up and ask permission to engage the enemy. I still haven't figured that out. Okay? Well, they were given permission to shoot at this box. They shot the box exploded. The only other recourse is to take that truck out. And our Bradley did so with extreme prejudice. They took it out, and we arrived on the scene. My platoon leader calls me up and says, Sergeant Horn, you got to go out there and investigate this truck. I said, sir, this truck has just been shot, just exploded. There's expected to be explosives in the back of this truck. Why do you want me to walk up on this thing? You got to do it. Okay. I followed orders. I did it. I got out of the Bradley. I told my soldiers to stay behind. I didn't want, in case I was to walk up and there was a secondary explosion, I just said I'll be the only one it gets, you know, just me. Stay here. If I need you, I'll call you. So I walk up on the scene. I get up there. There's bodies all over the road, all over the street. I step down on the curb, and literally, I'm ankle deep in blood. It's a horrific scene, one of the worst things I personally ever saw. There was a few survivors laying around, and one of them started pointing up to the back of the truck saying, Mister, please, help, help. And I looked up. Initially, all I saw was like body parts hanging over the truck. It was just a terrible scene. My first response, I told the man, I was like, sir, dead. He's dead. Nothing I can do. And he's like, no, please, please. So I took a few steps back so I could see higher into the dump truck, and I actually saw movement through the fire. Through the flames, I could see somebody crawling around like they were trying to get out or whatever. Instinct, first thing I did was ran up to the front of the truck, crawled up the bumper, crawled up the hood of the truck, and crawled into the back of the dump truck to try and help whoever I could. When I get there, I see a young boy there. He was probably about 18 years old. At least that's what I was told. I don't know. He was about 18, and he was sitting in the fire. He was just sitting. He had crawled into a certain area, and he had sat down, just Indian style, sitting with flames all around him. And you could tell he was in shock. He really, to me, he just looked like he didn't even know where he was. I reached in. I was trying to grab him. I kept yelling for him, come to me. And he wasn't moving. I reached in closer and almost got my hand on him, and he crawled away from me, and he went over to another young man or whatever that had been blown to bits. He'd been blown to pieces. There was nothing left of him really. But he grabbed a hold of him and he hugged him. He didn't want to leave him. And that, when I saw that, it just it did something to me. I really couldn't take it. I reached in. I said, "We got to go." And I grabbed him, snatched him out of the truck. And at this time, one of my team leaders had come up. I handed the boy down from the truck and told him, my team leader, I said, "Check him out. Do some first aid, whatever you can do." Well, I can hear from a distance, I hear all my soldiers yelling, "Sergeant Horn, get down. This thing's going to blow again," whatever. Everybody was concerned there was going to be a secondary explosion, and I was going to go with it. I took one more look before I got down, and I saw another young man lying in the fire, face down. I took a real close look to make sure he wasn't still alive, but I saw him breathing. At that time, I didn't know what to do. I couldn't leave the guy. I mean, enemy or not, I don't know. Just something about me, I couldn't leave the guy. So I reached back in. I crawled up in the truck a little bit further, and the guy was he was blown to all his clothes were blown off. He looked like he was still intact at first, but all his clothes were blown off from the explosion. He took a direct hit. Well, I reached in the fire, I grabbed him, and I pulled him to me. And when he rolled over on top of me, all of his internal organs, his intestines, his stomach, everything spilled out into my lap. Well, I figured immediately there's nothing I can do for the guy. I can't help him. There's nothing really I could do, but at least I wanted to pull him out of the flames. I couldn't leave him just laying there like that. So I pulled him toward the front of the dump truck up to a higher spot where he would be out of the flames, and then I left him. There was nothing I could do. As I was trying to pull him, it looked as if it was tearing his legs from his body. There was nothing I could do for him. I got down. I determined at this time there probably wasn't going to be a secondary explosion, so I called up some of my soldiers to administer first aid to the survivors. And about a minute or so later, that young man that I'd pulled from the fire had toppled out of the back of the truck. A dump truck is what, 8, 10 feet high or so maybe? He landed in the street, and when I saw him, I noticed his head had misshaped. He had landed, it looked like to me, he had landed directly on his head. He had landed into a pool of either diesel fuel or gasoline. I'm guessing diesel fuel because I'm still here. And there he was lying there, and there was nothing anybody could do for him. I didn't want to just fire off a round and have my platoon hear a gunshot and distance and direction, take me out. So I told my platoon leader, just like some of the reoccurring themes I've heard here today, I told my platoon leader what I intended to do. I could not leave him laying there like that. I made the decision then to put the young man out of his misery. Nothing else I could do. Now, at this time, if you don't mind, I got to read a little bit because I told you the story because I've lived it. I know it, but some of this other stuff. Some of you here today may be asking yourself, or maybe saying to yourself, I would have done the same thing. Some of you may think I was wrong in my decision and say that you yourself would never have done what I've done. And that's okay too. I'm not here to convince you that I was right or to convince you that I was a super soldier and never made mistakes. But what I can tell you in full confidence is if you've never been there, if you've never been placed in that situation, you do not know what you would do. Now, I myself have spent many hours since that night asking myself, what could I have done differently? There's several ways I could have handled things, but I made a choice then, and I have to live with that choice. And to be honest, if I had to do it all over again, I think I would make the same choice. I was charged with the first-degree murder of Qasim Hassan, and I'll never forget his name. I honestly felt a part of me died that night also. I guess I'll never know for sure what those men were doing in the back of the truck, since I didn't see it. But regardless, once I got on the ground, it seemed more important to me at the time to help the injured in any way I could. I'm not sure if I'll ever completely come to terms with everything I saw and did in Iraq, but I do know one thing. I am not a murderer. I'm not sure if I'll ever completely come to terms with everything I saw and did in Iraq, but I do know one thing. I am not a murderer. I did the job I was asked to do to the best of my ability, And I'm proud to say that because of my actions on the battlefield and because of my leadership, I never lost a single soldier in the line of duty. I know the big man upstairs is to receive most of the credit for that, but I like to think I played a little part in it. So. Now, another part of these reoccurring things we were hearing about. My JAG lawyer told me that unless I accepted a plea bargain, I would spend the rest of my life in prison. My lawyer told me he had the same boss as my prosecutor. So pretty much everything I asked for was denied. I asked to have my trial moved back to the States. That was denied. I had a lieutenant, excuse me, I can't remember his name. He was a gentleman from the Navy. He did a teleprompter interview sort of thing with me from Walter Reed Army Hospital. He only had a couple hours to talk, but he said that he felt I was suffering from PTSD, and he wanted to come to Kuwait, or I'm sorry, to Iraq on my behalf to testify. When he got there, he actually made it there. They wouldn't let him go on. So, I felt like I had no choice. I accepted a plea bargain for second-degree murder instead of first. It assured me I would spend no more than 10 years in prison. And I was lucky. My jury came back with only 3. When I first started my sentencing, I was sent to a holding facility in Kuwait. It was made up of tents with these little wooden boxes built inside of them. And at least that's all I ever saw of it. During my stay there, I was told on a daily basis I would be getting out of solitary confinement. I spent 55 days in that wooden box. Oftentimes, I would be forgotten about for several hours. More than once, I was forced to relieve myself on the floor of my very cell, a little 7x7 cell, because they'd forget about me. They wouldn't hear me yelling for them. A few times I got sick in there, I'd yell, I'd scream and holler. Nobody could hear me. They'd forget I was there. I had no choice. Also, on the same note, the cot that I was given to sleep on was broken. And I was forced to sleep on the same floor that I had relieved myself on. And the whole time I was there, I couldn't help but think that the enemy prisoner of war that I personally captured received better treatment than what I was receiving. Very hard to come to terms with that. Now I want you all to know and understand that I understand today is not about me. Today is about the young men in Leavenworth that stand accused of similar charges who have lost their freedom due to their actions in the line of fire. None of us are perfect, and I'm certain there's not one of us that wouldn't go back in time and change something about the way we did things over there if given the opportunity. I personally never asked anyone to agree with me on my decision, but I do ask that somehow we come together in support for these troops and know that they are the reason we have the freedom in this country that we do today. I ask that instead of passing judgment on these young soldiers, you trust that they made the best decisions possible during what was probably the most difficult time of their lives. Yes, there are indefensible crimes like rape, torture, things of that nature. These are not the actions I'm talking about. I'm talking about men like Lieutenant Michael Behena, who captured a known Al-Qaeda operative in Ali Mansour and during questioning was attacked by Mansour. So First Lieutenant Behena did what he was trained to do. He took Mansour out. Now me, as a former soldier, I would say good job, and as a patriot and United States citizen, I would say thank you. But instead, someone somewhere sitting in an air-conditioned office decided that First Lieutenant Behena needed to be made to stand trial for the death of a known terrorist. Please help me understand this. Though on paper you might not agree with some of the things some of the soldiers have done, I understand, and so should you, that the situation brought about these soldiers' actions, not the soldier's heart. Actions like these are very seldom planned or realized on paper. Therefore, it is unfair to judge these soldiers by the most strict letter of the law when what we are asked to do is so unnatural. We all did things in the war that we know we would never do again, would never have done in the first place, had we not been faced with the horrors of war. Some forgiveness should be warranted for these soldiers that have fallen to this misfortune. I'm deeply saddened that after my accomplishments in the United States Army, I was released as a demoted private. I I would have liked nothing more to walk across that parade field one last time as a staff sergeant, which I achieved in rank, by the way, in about a 4-year period. Those of you in the military might know that that's a pretty good step. All right? I would have liked nothing more to cross that parade field one last time as a staff sergeant, shook a few hands, said goodbye to my soldiers, and passed the baton to someone else as I rejoined my family. But that's not the way it was for me. I felt as if I was made an example of, not for the sake of my fellow soldiers, but for the sake of the Iraqi people. I felt and still feel it was the Army's way of showing the Iraqi people that we are a kinder, gentler Army, and death on the battlefield will not be tolerated. Well, I can tell you, my life and the life of my fellow brothers in arms is worth a hell of a lot more than to be used as some political tool to be disposed of when my usefulness has expired. I signed up to defend the Constitution of the United States of America and did so to the best of my ability, and I was punished accordingly for it. Today, however, is a great day, and I want to personally thank every one of you here today for showing support for our troops. For those that don't understand why we are gathered here, and why it's important for us to stand up for these men, I'll make it simple. Among other reasons, each and every one of these cases that have been made public puts our troops in more and more danger every day, which in turn puts our very freedom in jeopardy. When a soldier hears of other soldiers being persecuted for doing their job, it makes a soldier hesitate before he pulls the trigger. A soldier that hesitates is a dead soldier. How many of you have people overseas right now? How pissed off would you be if one of your loved ones were hurt in the line of fire because he hesitated, because he didn't know what to do, because he was trained to do one thing, and when he got over there, he was told he had to do another? I've experienced that lost feeling myself. Sorry, I lost my place. Anyway, you weaken a soldier, you demoralize a soldier with these actions, and pretty soon you have an army of highly trained soldiers that are scared to fight. It might not happen overnight, but it will happen. So I ask everybody here today, don't stop here. As they've already said several times before, call news medias, call who you have to, call your congressman. Let your voices be heard in support for these men. Ask them and demand an answer to this question. Since when do we buy an enemy country's allegiance by persecuting our own people? Thank you.
Great field, but these are the people who appreciate what you did. Thank you for your service.